Well, I'm excited to be your moderator here today for the session, Embracing Diversity to Heal Racism. And the speaker here is Arno Michaelis, and he is the author of My Life After Hate and works with Serve to Unite, which engages students creatively with a global network of peacemakers and mentors in partnership with Against Violent Extremism, the Forgiveness Project, and Over My Shoulder Foundation. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Michaelis was deeply involved with racist skinhead organizations, a reverend of a self-declared racial holy war, and the lead singer of the hate metal band Centurion, which sold 20,000 CDs by the mid-90s and is still popular with racists today. Single parenthood, love for his daughter, and the forgiveness shown by people he once hated helped to turn his life around. Please join me in welcoming Arno Michaelis.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thanks to all of you for being here today. It's inspirational to me to see so many young people who are not only interested but dedicated, especially for our students from Baja. I understand you guys had to get up pretty early this morning to be here today, so thank you so much for that. That means a lot to me because I hate getting up early. So the fact you guys got up so early to come here, that means the world to me. I'm going to start out by introducing you to who I used to be. This is a video from my former band, and I'll warn you ahead of time, there's some very horrible language in here that I would never use today, but I think it's important that you hear it just to get an idea of who I was 20 years ago and what sort of transformation we're talking about.
We must secure the existence of our race and the future of white children. This one's called Centurion.
Believe it or not, that was the night that I left the movement, as we called it. That was an April evening in 1994. By that time, I had been involved in hate groups for 7 years. And I was kind of looking for an excuse to leave. And the reason why I was looking was because of exhaustion. I do quite a few talks like this, and I love the question and answer sessions. So I hope as I'm telling the story, you all can think of some great questions for me. There's one question I get more often than anything else. Does anyone want to care to take a guess what that question is?
What was it that changed you?
Exactly. What changed me? What brought about that kind of change? And the simple answer to that is exhaustion. It's an exhausting process to be involved in a fundamentalist ideology because the world isn't a fundamental place. From a fundamentalist standpoint, everything is either black or white, it's good or evil, according to whatever kind of set of rules you want to give it. Whether those rules are ones based in racism and white supremacy, or if they're based in politics and an affinity for left wing or right wing, or if they're rules based in religion and people outside of your religion are bad and you're good. In any case, the world never agrees with those fundamental rules. So you have to spend a lot of energy blocking out all this information that comes to you from the rest of the world, indicating that you're full of it, indicating that this fundamental ideology you're trying to attach to and you're trying to make your identity is very wrong. If you guys are downtown San Diego or maybe even TJ, in Milwaukee, they have those horse-drawn carriages. And you'll see the horses have the blinders on, like this. So they don't want to see the cars and get freaked out by them and whatnot. Adhering to that kind of fundamentalist ideology is like walking around with those kind of blinders. This is all, I'm not trying to hear anything that doesn't tell me that white people are better than everybody else and different than everybody else and incapable of living in peace with everyone else. It's the same kind of process. And it takes a lot of energy to keep those blinders up everywhere you go, every day of your waking life, which you have to do, because if you don't, this card house of your identity built on this ideology starts coming down. Has anyone ever built a house of cards? A couple people have. Has anyone ever seen a YouTube video? It's, playing card is a little kind of flimsy thing, and it's kind of cool. It's kind of a Zen activity. You have to be very gentle and very mindful, and you place cards upon cards, and if you're really good, you get like a big giant one. But the slightest around the room, the slightest breath will just send that whole card house tumbling down. That's what a racist ideology is like. It's a card house. It's a construct. And it takes a lot of energy to build and even more energy to protect. Because if you guys are coming around my card house now, it's easy to knock that whole thing over. So I'm going to protect the card house, and I'm with violence if necessary. And ironically, the reason why I built that card house is because I wanted a reason to be violent. I wanted an excuse to be violent. There are different aspects of that exhaustion, though. Another aspect was the denial I had to go through and the disconnect from the rest of the culture in the world. White supremacist ideology dictates that you cannot enjoy any sort of media, music, movies, newspapers, information that's not blatantly racist and agreeing with your ideas. So you can't experience those things that you may have grown up with. Now, I grew up in Wisconsin, so obviously I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. This is particularly difficult for me to talk about after Sunday. Be that as it may, when I was a skinhead and the Packers were playing, I couldn't say, hey, skinhead buddies, let's go watch the Packer game. Anyone want to take a guess why? What's that? Exactly. There's black guys and white guys on the same team, and they have to play together and really be rooting for each other and pulling for each other if they want to win. So football was forbidden to white racists. So on Sundays, if I could sneak away, I'd go into my dingy little efficiency apartment and I'd turn the Packer game on really low. Woo, touchdown. I couldn't let my buddies know that I was doing that, or it would have reflected poorly on me as a leader of hate groups. In the early 90s is when Seinfeld came out. Anybody like watching Seinfeld? I love it. I've seen every episode a billion times and I could quote it all day. But when it first came out, it was called the water cooler show because people in the office would be talking about it the next day around the water cooler. Oh, that was so funny, the soup Nazi. And my girlfriend and I were like everybody else. We loved it too. And my girlfriend worked nights, so I had to tape it for her when she was at work. And most people in this room, consider yourself very lucky that you never had to deal with these video recorders and trying to program them and set the clock. And so it was brutal. Now he's got DVRs. It's awesome. So I would tape Seinfeld for my girlfriend, and when she'd get home, we'd watch it together. But I couldn't write Seinfeld on the tape. Because if my guys came over and they saw a tape said Seinfeld on it, they'd be like, what's that? Why are you watching those Jews? So we had to put it on a tape that said Amber's second birthday party. because we knew no one would ask to watch that, except for parents and whatnot. Now, as comical as those ideas may be, it was also very serious. And it was exhausting to not enjoy things that I liked because of this ideology I was trying to live up to. Another element of that exhaustion was humiliation. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew when we jumped a black kid on the street corner because he was black and by himself and we were a bunch of like 10 drunken skinheads, that was horribly wrong. And we beat this kid up really, really badly. And even at the time, I knew it was wrong. But I just suppressed that feeling. I suppressed the humanity in me to commit that violence. And that violent act never left. Every day since that day, I remember that happening. And as a skinhead, I'm trying to justify that. I'm trying to say, well, that's because we're at war. This is a race war. We got to win. But I knew it was wrong. That was an exhausting process. Probably what was most exhausting, though, was when people who I was openly hostile to, black people, Latino people, gay and lesbian people, Jewish people, Muslim people, treated me as a human being when I refused to acknowledge their humanity. I refused to acknowledge my own humanity. I didn't consider anyone who wasn't white to be a human being. And I let everybody know that. Yet there were people who were brave enough to see me doing this, to see in my eyes how angry I was and how hateful I was, and still respond to me and say, you know what, you're a good person, whether you want to admit it or not. And I'm going to treat you with kindness. Those things probably, I think, contributed most to that exhaustion. Because I knew deep down that these people were good and they were human. There was, fortunately, a lot of incidents of kindness that helped plant seeds in who I am and put me in the right position to leave the movement that night of that show. There were kind of catalyst events also that helped along the way. In 1992, my daughter was born. Her mother and I, her mother was also a neo-Nazi skinhead. She and I felt that it was our duty as white people to have white children. Because part of the talking points of white racists is that we're being outbred. Everybody else is having way more babies than we are. And it's actually true. Birth rates around the world are much higher for everyone but white people. And today I'm totally cool with that. I look forward to the day when we're all very interrelated and we can look at people and say, that's another human being, instead of saying, you're white, you're brown, you're yellow, you're black. But for white racists, it's a very scary thing because, we're going to be the minority and everybody else is going to be pissed. Like, they're rightfully angry for being treated as a minority for the past 500 years. So my daughter was born in 92, and go figure, but hate and violence isn't very conducive to a healthy romantic relationship. So her mother and I broke up about 18 months after she was born. And I was pretty surprised we made it that long. I found myself a single parent early in 94, and a couple months later was the night of that show. After the show, a friend of mine who was also lead singer in a white power band went out on a beer run. They picked a fight. There was gunshots, and he was shot and killed. In 1990, my best friend Chuck was shot and killed in a street fight as he was out practicing hate and violence as I had taught him to do. When Chuck was killed, we went ballistic. We went on a rampage throughout the city that lasted for months. We hurt all sorts of innocent people. We hurt ourselves, we hurt our families, we hurt society. We passed on the hurt that we felt from our murdered friend, multiplied it exponentially, and dumped it out into society. The second murder, though, I was in a much different place, mainly because of my daughter. And by this time in my life, I had lost count of how many friends I had who were incarcerated. So it hit me that night that if I didn't change my ways, death or prison was very likely to take me from my daughter. So that was the excuse I was looking for to leave the movement. And all of those things had to come together to lead me up to that time. I think if one of those things were missing, that second murder may have driven me further into hate groups. It may have made me more violent than I already was. But fortunately, all these things contributed to my exhaustion. One of the probably more powerful acts of kindness happened when I was just getting into the skinhead group. I was 16. I had dropped out of high school because I'm a gifted genius. I don't know if I mentioned that, you guys. My mom says I'm a gifted genius, and everybody's been telling me that since I was a little kid. So at 16, I figured I was so gifted, I don't even need to go to school anymore. So I dropped out, and I got a job printing T-shirts, third shift, 40 hours a week. I got the job because of my mother. My mom, being a very practical person, said, if you're not going to go to school, you're going to be going to work. So she talked to a friend of hers who had a T-shirt printing business, and he gave me a job, even though I was only 16. I'd never seen a T-shirt printing press in my life. And I found myself working third shift for 40 hours a week. And at first I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. I don't have to go to school. I could drink all the time. But no, I moved out. I was living with a bunch of punk rockers and skinheads. But after a while, the reality of an 8-hour workday starts to wear in, starts to sink in. And I'm starting to have nights where I'm like, maybe this wasn't the best idea. And I noticed that the guys I worked with were they were having a lot of fun during their shift. There were black guys and Latino guys and white guys, and they'd all be hanging out together. They'd all be talking about the Packer game. And I wanted to go talk with them and laugh with them, but I can't. That's right. I hate black and Latino people. So I would keep to myself, and the only time I would talk to anybody is when I talked to other white guys to tell them about all my white power stuff. And I'd try to recruit them. Like, hey, they have a lot more babies than we do. You know that Jewish people are taking our money to give it to lazy black people who don't want to work? When in reality, the man who gave me that job was Jewish. And when my mom found out that I was wearing swastikas into his factory and trying to recruit all the white guys I worked with, she was humiliated. And she called him up and she was crying, and his name was Jack. She's like, Jack, I'm so sorry. I don't know where I went wrong. I totally understand if you fire him. And Jack just goes, he's a good kid. He's just going through a phase. And not only did he not fire me, he hired my skinhead buddies. My best friend, Pat O'Malley, who, believe it, his voice made mine sound like a chipmunk. You just talk like this. And he had Pat selling T-shirts, telemarketing. He'd be calling up shops in the mall going hey, do you want to buy some Metallica shirts? It was pretty funny, but at the same time, working at this place, all the black and Latino guys knew I was racist because I told them all the time. But one day I was in a break room, it's lunchtime, I'm in the corner, I'm starving, I'm hungover, I'm miserable. I have no lunch because I just rolled out of bed hungover and I was drinking all night. And a black guy I'm working with is sitting down, he's unwrapping his sandwich he packed, and it's cut in half. And he sees me sitting there in the corner and he's like, hey, skinhead, you want half this sandwich? And I didn't want to take it from him. I'm trying to hate black people, so how's this guy going to give me a sandwich like this? But hunger is a powerful motivator, so especially when you're hungover. So I get up and I go walk across the room and I snatch it out of his hand. I don't even say thank you. I go back in the corner, I eat it. And he just shrugs and eats his other half of the sandwich and proceeds to talk about the Packer game with his buddies. So those acts of kindness added to that sense of exhaustion in all sorts of ways. One, because I wasn't any less intelligent then than I am now. And walking out of work that day, it was kind of hard for me to go preaching on about how Jewish people are stealing our money to give it to lazy black people who don't want to work, when in fact, I have a job because of the good graces of a Jewish man, and black people are actually feeding me. So I was a hypocrite. But the kindness that they both showed to me really set an example of how human beings should treat each other. And I never forgot that example. Even though it took me 7 years to finally get it through my head and finally get in a place to leave and turn that around, they contributed to my turnaround. So that's why it's very important when we talked earlier about practicing peace on a daily basis. The root causes of violence are isolation and suffering. And those two factors feed each other. The isolation may not be physical, it usually isn't, but it's spiritual and it's intellectual. It's isolation saying, I am not like you. You are not my people. I'm not a part of this human race. I'm not a part of this society. And when people think like that, it hurts. Because no matter how they try to justify it, it sucks to be cut off from everybody else, even if you're the one doing it. So the isolation causes suffering, which causes more isolation. And as this cycle builds, it can get to the point where someone would walk into a place of worship and murder 6 people out of the blue. That's how people become so miserable that homicide followed by suicide seems to make sense. So I know that the next person on the verge of hurting themselves and others is out there. We don't know who that person is. We don't know where they are, which is why it's all the more important that every one of us commit ourselves to practicing peace, practicing kindness. I love the questions that were asked to the panel earlier, and they were brilliant questions. But when people say, what can I do? Smile at people. Hold the door for people. Be nice to everyone you meet. Listen to people. These things sound very simple, and they might sound inconsequential, but these exact innocuous acts of kindness are what changed the course of my life. And when the course of my life changed, it put me in a position to help other people maybe change the course of their lives. So since I've been doing this, the King holiday of 2010, so it's 5 years since I started doing this, including you guys, I've talked to a cumulative audience of almost 20,000 people face to face, many more through media. If one of those people is making a better decision today because of this experience that I share, now this dude sharing a sandwich with me has changed the course of their life. And all the things downstream from their life. This could be a grave that's not filled. It could be a prison cell that's vacant. It would be one more mother who's not mourning a dead child. And all the suffering that comes with that goes throughout the world. So going forth from here, be confident that your practice of peace and kindness and patience and forgiveness has the power to change the world. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelis, and we will now open the floor for questions from the audience. And please keep in mind that questions are for students only, not our adults. And if you have a question, please raise your hand and a volunteer will come out with a microphone, and you may ask Mr. Michaelis your question directly. No, go behind you.
Do you view the white skinhead group as like a cult, or as it to possibly become a cult someday?
That's an interesting question. I've had a lot of people who are like, I'm a cult researcher, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, we didn't wear like white robes and, burn incense and talk about flying saucers and stuff like that. So but at the same time, there were a lot of elements of cult kind of environment that were common to the white power skinhead scene. That mainly that blocking out of inconvenient information. That's probably the prime one. And also, now as you mentioned this, it's very interesting because I work with a lot of former gang members from all sorts of gangs, Bloods, Crips, whatever, everything in between. And one of the men I work with was saying that being in a gang is a form of slavery. You're a slave to the rules of that gang. And that's very much true in the case of cults also. When you join that cult and you commit yourself to whatever it is, you all of a sudden now have these rules that you have to live by. It's not an option to think outside of that box. And that's the same with street gangs, it's the same with white power skinheads. And in my case, when I first peeked outside of that box and got a whiff of the freedom of not having to be bound by those rules, I just ran with it. It was incredibly empowering to me. And I imagine, a recovering cult member would probably go through the same experience. So I think there are a lot of similarities. I don't know that it can be properly defined as a cult, though.
So the lady in the back over there.
What age did you start realizing that you were having hate for blacks and Jews and anyone who wasn't white?
I got involved in white power skinheads when I was 16, but by that time I was very accustomed to hate and violence, and I don't believe there's ever an excuse to be hateful or violent. I don't care what happened to you. I don't care what happened to you individually. I don't care what happened to your ethnicity. I don't care what happened to in history. There's never an excuse to hate people. There's never an excuse to be violent. That being said, a lot of my peers, a lot of my fellow skinheads came from really rough environments. They came from poverty, came from violence. In my case, I grew up in a nice suburb of Milwaukee. Nice house, nice neighborhood, never went hungry, never took a beating. My parents both loved me very much. They were together. I got a ton of positive affirmation. But my father was an alcoholic, and he did more drinking than working. And that left it on my mom to work 2 jobs at times to keep the lights on and the food on the table, plus take care of me, who was an absolute nightmare of a kid, and my little brother, whose life I made miserable every day. And my mom was just miserable her entire life, and that hurt me, and I started lashing out at other kids because of that. And I also distanced myself from my parents because I didn't want to be around that miserable. So I was a bully on the school bus as early as kindergarten. As I grew older, the lashing out kind of grew with me. So I was getting in fights in the schoolyard, and then in middle school I was doing breaking and entering and vandalism. And by the end of middle school, I could have really honestly say, I hate this town. I hate this city. I hate my school. I hate these people I go to school with. I hate the teachers. I hate the principals. At times, I hate my parents. So I'm hateful and I'm violent. And then I started drinking when I'm 14, and now I'm really, really hateful and violent and buck wild, just destruction machine running rampant. And I love to make people angry. I loved, at least I had myself convinced that I did. I love to lash out at society. Nothing makes people angrier than a swastika. So that's really what got me involved with it at first, was the repulsion of it and how it was so frowned upon by the status quo. But then, of course, once I assumed that identity and started going out there practicing it, the world reflected the hate and violence that I was putting out into it exponentially at times, and that seemed to validate all of the ideology. It made me even more hateful and violent.
So this boy in the front.
So I firmly believe that people can change, and that there's good in everyone, especially through these compassion, love, and forgiveness. But I think a lot of the time as a society, people find it hard to see that. And seeing people like you who have taken their previous ideas and used them to motivate and to inspire and to create something beautiful, that can really be assuring for the rest of society. But I think we've got a long way to go with that and turning people into new people who can create these things. So I just wanted to know what you think about different ways that we can, or in an organized way, kind of influence that and inspire that, and what your organization does in that sense.
Excellent. Brilliant thought and excellent question. As I said in the plenary, I think the most important factor is that every one of us as individuals do not give up on the idea of peace. We do not lose faith in the basic human goodness that all people have. And it is extremely difficult. In Milwaukee, in the past 3 months, a 5-year-old kid was shot and killed in crossfire. And then, like a few weeks ago, a 1-year-old baby was shot and killed in crossfire. And things like that happen, and it gets very, very difficult to be like, peace, guys, after a 1-year-old baby is shot and killed. But that's why it's all the more important, and that's really when it gets difficult. I run Serve Unite with a guy named Pardeep Kalika, whose father was murdered by a white supremacist. And so when I see people who are, I'll work with kids and they'll be like, well, he did this to me. He looked at me funny. He said something bad on my Facebook page. I'm like, okay, what are you doing about it? Are you saying something bad back, or are you like putting some positive energy into Facebook? Are you practicing kindness? Because look what Pardeep's done. Pardeep had every right to want to respond with violence. And as a matter of fact, he has a younger brother, Amardeep, who's amazing in his own right. And the day after August 5th, all this money was pouring in from all over the world, and they had this big pile of money. And Amardeep said to Par, he's dead serious. He's like, dude, let's hire like a hitman to go out and just take out white supremacists. We got this big pile of money. And Pardeep said it would just make more of them. So it's not only the courage to keep believing in peace and to have faith, but it's the wisdom to know that that's not only the right thing to do, but it's the most effective thing to do. Because violence is a cyclical entity. It can never be ended with more violence. Pardeep and I, this past week, we heard about what was happening in Nigeria. We're sitting around and we're like, dude, Pardeep, like the most gentle, compassionate guy I know, he's like, somebody's got to go in there and just like clean that out. Like, I mean, he's at the end of his rope. And I'm like, I know, man. Like, I when things like that happen in my former violence, I'm like, I want to go in there and start killing Boko Haram. Let's just kill them all. This is beyond repair. But do you think Boko Haram operates because of a lack of violence? Do you think that they got the way they are because people weren't angry enough at them? They got to where they are because there has been a dearth of love and compassion in their lives. And that's true for anybody who commits violence. The guy he was trying to kill somebody else, but he killed a 1-year-old. That guy didn't roll out of bed like that. He became like that because of suffering, because of violence. So if we remember that hurt people, then we can approach those people who are doing harm with compassion. And in many ways, that disarms their ability to do further harm to us, at least emotionally. And this is very important. There is no organized effort that anybody can conceive of that is going to succeed unless it comes from that foundation. So that foundation is the most crucial aspect. Once that's done, and we're all, and asking about our organization, thank you very much for that. I'm going to bring our website back up here. We get students from all over the city of Milwaukee, and you'll see pictures of it as they roll through here, from the inner city to the suburbs, Milwaukee being the most segregated city in the United States for many years running. So we have schools where it's all 99% black kids and a couple Asians and Latinos, and we have schools that are 80% white and then a more diverse mix. We get these kids working together side by side on service learning projects. It's so much like WorldLink. That's why I love it being here today. We ask the students what their concerns are. What issues do you want to address in the society? And they say this, this, and that. And then we get them together and we talk to city officials. We talk to whoever we need to talk to get it done. They document this creatively, so they make movies, they write music, and they care for each other. They see each other as brothers and sisters. So they're solving problems in a context of human kinship and human identity. And that's, I think, it has to be the key to any organized effort.
girl in the middle, blonde. Yeah. And this will be our last question.
For anyone I missed, I'm on Facebook, and I'm also reachable via the contact form of this website. So if you have a question you'd like me to answer, feel free to hit me up on Facebook. Feel free to hit me up via the website. And please do like our Serve Unite Facebook page, share the amazing content our students are creating, and share your own content too. We'd love to include that on our website. I'm sorry, was the question?
So a lot of people would need to make peace with the people they've wronged to get past that phase in their life.
Right.
What did you do to, you even remember snatching the sandwich from the African American kid's hands. So I mean, did you apologize to all of these people? What have you done to make peace with that?
I'm doing it right now.
I mean,
But I don't, on a personal level, yeah, that's a very, that's a great question, and it's very important. I besides my family, who I've caused all sorts of pain, I have a daughter, and when she was 13 once, I lost track of her at Great America for 2 hours, and I lost my mind. Not knowing where my daughter is, thinking somebody took her, thinking she was gone. When I was 16, I disappeared for 2 months. So my mother didn't know where I was for 2 months. And I have a tiny idea of what kind of hell that is, what kind of hell I put her through, and my dad, and my brother. So I'm in a constant process of working with them on a personal level to try to repair that harm. I haven't had an opportunity to talk with anybody else face to face to do that process. And there's a lot of people that I heard. No one has really come forward and asked to do that. If they did, I would very happily sit and talk with them. The closest I had was interaction and a comment string of an online post that was about me, and the person had actually asked that I not discuss it further. So him and I had a interaction that I think was very powerful, but he asked me not to discuss the details of that. But I think the gist of the question is that why am I doing what I'm doing now? I'm doing this because I need to make a positive impact to account for the harm that I've done. I actually gave up a career as an information technology consultant to do this, where I made a lot of money, and I was also very good at it, and I liked IT, and I stopped doing that so I could do this, which is, and I've took a pretty huge pay cut to do it. So the reason I'm doing this is because I owe the world an apology, and it's important to me to be putting that apology out there every chance I get.
So can we give Mr. Michaelis one last round of applause? Thank you. And if you have any more questions, there will be tables outside at lunch where you can speak to all of the speakers and converse with them. So this is the end of briefing session number 1. Please make your way to briefing session number 2, which starts in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.